Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to Pain to Purpose Live. My name is Donnie Thomas. And if you haven't been here before, this is a space for transformation through our lived experiences and a space where we can grow in our creativity, our clarity, as well as our confidence. And so I want to take a second to see if you can hear me. I want to take a second to just check the levels. Can you hear me now? Yes. All right, great. Is there any delay? Okay. All right, cool, cool, cool. All right, so there's a little bit of a delay on my end. I'm going to actually come out of these monitors just so that I can hear a little bit more clearly on my end. Yeah, so today's Pain to Purpose Live is going to be a little bit different because we're going to focus on leadership. I know that we focus primarily around the themes of creative purpose, resilience, and the last topic, which is confidence, but I want to focus on leadership a little bit today. And the reason why is because we're moving into a new cycle of life for a time period where many of us mark as a new cycle of life for us, the new year. And so the topic for today is your evolution as a leader. And I've I thought a lot about this because I just finished the book Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukov. And in my reflection of the book, there have been a few questions that have come up for me. So if you are someone that feels like you're in a cycle of evolution for yourself, type it a yes in the chat or give me some kind of indication in the chat that you might be feeling like you are going through some kind of evolution, and we're constantly evolving. We're constantly graduating from phase to phase in our life, cycle to cycle, but we really have to spend some time understanding what that cycle is. There are cycles of destruction, there are cycles of creation, but it all adds to our evolution. And so, the key thing I really want you to take away from this is really understanding how to navigate the cycle that you are in. Everybody is going to be in a different cycle as a leader, as an individual, but a lot of times we get distracted because we're looking at the phase that somebody else is in, not realizing that they're in a different phase or a different cycle of their evolution. And we have to respect the cycle that we are in. And first, that comes with understanding what your cycle is. You might look back at your life and say to yourself, during this time, I typically feel this way, or during this time, I typically go through these types of things, this time of the year or this time of the day. And so, taking the time to really do that inventory about the cycle that you might be in right now will give you a lot of clarity in terms of how you are evolving as a person and as a leader. And as I did in the last session, I want to invite you to take a moment to set your intention for today and align it with your attention. I want you to focus on the things that I'm talking about and that we're discussing here that might align with where you are. If there is something that doesn't resonate with you, don't focus on that. I want you to focus on what you can take away from this talk to apply in your life and actually take action on so that you can get the results and the outcome that you want from listening to the discussion today. So, without further ado, we will proceed with the discussion on your evolution as a leader. And so, what is a leader? So, I was looking at the root word of leader, and a couple words jumped out at me, and it was They were to go forth and to guide, to go forth and to guide, to go before and to guide, meaning that you have to understand the way. You have to have some type of experience in order to guide other people. You have to have some type of vision in order to guide other people. In order to be a leader, you have to have a clear understanding of where you're guiding people to, where you're taking people to. And oftentimes that comes with where you've taken yourself. I'm sure many of us have encountered people who have tried to take us somewhere that they've never been. They are shooting in the dark, the blind leading the blind. And there's too much of that going on right now. And I'm not saying that people can't lead or guide through their unlived experiences, but what I am saying is that although you may not necessarily have had an experience, having a vision of where you want to go is important. And having been there, I think gives you that extra layer. But if you don't have the vision and you haven't been there, you can't truly lead or be a leader or an effective leader. And someone would always tell me, someone knows what they're talking about if they can simplify it. And when you're listening to someone try to articulate their vision or try to articulate where they're guiding you to, I would ask you to take inventory of how simplistic they can make it. In my journey as a leader, I've gone through a number of cycles, but often times, every time, honestly, it came with me doing some deep introspection around where I wanted to take myself and how I wanted to impact the people that I serve. And as I was finishing the book, Seed of the Soul, I started to reflect on a few questions that I'm still pondering as I move into this new year. And the first question that came up was, do you think that a loving person is more evolved than a mean-spirited person? And this question jumped out at me, particularly as it relates to leadership, because we need to get back to infusing compassion in our leadership, infusing collaboration in our leadership. Yes, it is important for us and other people to all respect the roles that we play. Where we are in this time is a point where we're moving in the direction of more of a collaboration versus people with this hierarchical way of thinking, being, and doing. And when you are dealing with some leaders who come at other individuals from a mean-spirited approach, it oftentimes is because they believe that the individuals are inferior. And so as I think, and I thought about this question, do you think that a loving person is more evolved than a mean-spirited person? I would say yes, because authentic power is built by understanding purpose, by understanding the deepest parts of your soul. And I believe that the deepest parts of our soul ultimately want us to get closer to love of self, love of this life, love of others. And it is very hard to get there when the core of who you are is mean-spirited, when the core of who you are is rooted in a destructive cycle versus trying to constantly move yourself and others to a more creative and loving cycle and a more loving energy, a more loving frequency. Authentic power can't be gained by trying to tear down someone else, because that's usually a person that's trying to gain power and authority over other people because they feel inferior within themselves. And so when you think about yourself, think about whether or not you approach or try to approach situations with love. And love is not just in the romantic sense. You can approach your coworkers or your colleagues or your friends at work, your work friends, your work wife, your work husband, with love. And that is a higher frequency of collaboration than a frequency of fear, a mean spirited frequency that everybody runs from. People think I was working, with a senior leader who loved instilling fear in the people that they led. And it was very interesting to watch because that is how they motivated people. They motivated people by making them fear loss of their job, by making them fear loss of pay, by making them fear the power that they had versus inspiring them to evolve within themselves. And I watched how it changed the environment. It actually chipped at the environment day after day after day. So I want you to tell me in the chat, do you feel the same way? Do you feel like a loving person is more evolved, or do you feel like a mean spirited person is more evolved, and why? And if there's a little bit of a latency, there's a little bit of a connection latency. So definitely take some time, put in the chat, and I'll field the questions as they come in. And if you're having technical difficulties, again, I'll field them as they come in. I'll try to make sure that I'm getting to as many responses as I can. But while we're waiting on that, this concept of love, I'm actually learning more and more and more how to adapt it into my everyday work with my clients in the language that I use. And it's hard sometimes. It's hard to use that kind of language because there's fear of all kinds of things, HR, all kinds of things. I believe a loving soul is evolved. Yes, no, and I'm thank you for chiming in. But it's hard sometimes to have those kinds of conversations in the workplace because people often divorce or try to divorce their emotion from the workplace, but we really can't because people can see when you're upset. Why wouldn't you want them to see when you're loving, when you're caring, when you're compassionate? Why wouldn't you want them to see when you are empathizing with them? It doesn't mean that you can't be an effective leader and hold people accountable and hold yourself accountable, because the real thing is that you can't make anybody do anything as a leader. You can influence, you can guide. The key components of leadership are being able to go before and guide. And you can either go before in your mind as a visionary, understanding the vision that you want to create, or you can go before through your lived experience and guide people to the result that they want to create or that you want to recreate. But there's a really, really, really big problem that I see in leadership. This let's get it done attitude is so pervasive, and it's pervasive in leaders that don't truly have a grasp on where they want to take their organizations, their teams, or even themselves. They have some outcome that they believe they want, but they don't have the words to articulate what they actually want to see. And it causes actually a lot of inefficiency. It causes rework, which increases costs. It decreases morale. And ultimately, it just makes everything more and more inefficient. And so as leaders, it's important to not only set the tone energetically by entering spaces with love and compassion and those higher frequencies that will allow and attract people to you, similar, to the phrase, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar, I think it is. But you want to make sure that you're minimizing and eliminating that mean-spirited energy as much as possible, because guess what? It doesn't mean that you're not going to have bad days. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody has a bad day. And sometimes you have to pause and take inventory of yourself to understand when that moment is so that you can do what you need to do to realign yourself to the energy that's going to be most productive in that environment. So that's one of the questions that I've been thinking about, and I would invite you to think about more is, do you think that a loving person is more evolved than a mean-spirited person? And if you think that a loving person is more evolved, then make sure that you are moving and set your intention to continue to move in alignment with that. The next question that I was thinking about was a very interesting one in terms of evolution. Do you ever feel or suspect that you have gifts to give and you want to know what they are? Do you ever feel or suspect that you have gifts to give and you want to know what they are? This is probably one of the biggest questions that most of us wrestle with. We get to a point in our lives where we want to start living consciously instead of unconsciously. Conscious living is very intentional because you have the sole responsibility of creating the vision and the outcomes for your life that you want. And it's hard because in our earlier years, we are encouraged to live unconsciously. We're told the steps that we need to take in order to be successful instead of giving the tools that we need to explore what success looks like for us. And so it's very hard for us to switch from unconscious living to conscious living because for so long, for much of our lives, from the time we were born to 18 and we graduated high school or we graduated college, we were told what we should be and what we should think and what we should do. And the point after all of that, after all the unconscious living where many of us start to take inventory of who we are and what truly makes us come alive in terms of our passion. And I was looking at the word passion the other day, and I actually love the root word of it because the root word of passion is suffering, and it is doing that thing that you want to accomplish and that you're willing to suffer for in order to accomplish. That is the core of passion. But we're sort of given that unconsciously. Many of us develop an artificial passion for going to school and getting an education because we don't understand how to use that tool or that mechanism in our lives in order to liberate ourselves. We are told the courses to take. We are told the people that we should be around instead of, again, being taught to live consciously. And once we shift into a conscious way of living, that's when we start to say, well, what am I really good at? Yeah, I guess I'm good at, you know, art, or I guess I'm good at, teaching or politics, but what truly are the gifts that I possess? Because now I want to explore myself even more. Now I'm at a place where there's dissonance within myself that is causing me to feel like I have not achieved what I'm supposed to achieve while I'm here. Even the most accomplished of us encounter situations where we've gotten all the money, all of the assets, all of the accolades, all of the degrees, and we are still unhappy because we haven't understood what our gifts are and how to exercise them. And so the question, do you ever feel or suspect that you have gifts to give and want to know what they are? I absolutely can identify with that question. But I also have sat for many years to refine my understanding of what they are. And so for those of you out there, I want to hear from you. what are your thoughts on this question? Have you or do you struggle with understanding what your gifts are, and you feel like you have gifts, but you don't know what they truly are? Because if you are going through that, one of the things I will say is spend time in solitude. Understanding your gifts means first understanding what your creative purpose is. And as I mentioned in an earlier session, your creative purpose is rooted in what you define is your purpose. What you define is the meaning for how you want to use your gifts. And so, how do you find your gifts? Finding your gifts is about exploration. It's about looking at the thing that you do easy that other people say, wow, I can't do that. I would love to be able to do that. But you do it so easy. And to you, you think that it's just nothing. It's just something simple. It's not valuable. But to them, they would go through heck and high water just to have the ability that you have. And when you hear people say that about you, no matter how small you think it is, that might be an indication to you that that might be a gift worth exploring. And the reason why I use the example of what other people say about you, because I believe that the universe sends us people to act as mirrors and to show us and reveal things about ourselves that we can't see because we're not looking at ourselves. Have you ever looked in the mirror and you can see everything that's going on, but if you're not looking in the mirror and somebody is like, oh, you have something on your face. If you were looking, they actually are able to see the thing that you can't see. And they're acting in that moment as a mirror. And that's just one way. But another way is when you sit with yourself and you learn to be your own mirror. That's a lot harder because that takes solitude, that takes removal of the noise, and that takes experimenting with the things that you are curious about. You see, in order to understand your gifts, you have to develop a sort of curiosity about things, and you have to be willing to try different things and sample different things and not look at it as a failure because you tried something and you didn't like it. Because you may discover that you have one gift. You may discover that you have 100 gifts. And honestly, it's a lot harder for the person that has a whole bunch of gifts because then they get analysis paralysis. They find it challenging to figure out what they want to hone in on. And so, again, for those of you who are out there who might be thinking about your own evolution, ask yourself, do you ever feel or suspect that you have gifts to give and you just don't know what they are? And if you're asking yourself that question, and if that question is something that you feel is important for you to take away from this discussion, align your attention and your intention with discovering the answer for you. Now, the last question that I've been pondering in this whole discussion of evolution, and more particularly evolution as a leader, is what makes a powerful person powerful. I'll start with the first part of that question. If you have any thoughts on what makes a powerful person powerful, I want to first see something in the chat. Like if you have any thoughts on what makes a powerful person powerful. Because, I'm interested in knowing if we're in alignment with what we believe. And if you're typing and there might be a little bit of latency, don't worry, just type and I'll get to the question as quickly as possible. or your response as quickly as possible. Okay. All right. Influence. Okay, yes. What makes a powerful person powerful? I see the word influence and I love that word. I was thinking earlier today while I was in the car, literally about the equation for power. And the equation for power is known in a few different forms. In some forms, it is known as work over the amount of time, energy over the amount of time. And when you look at those, just those two words, time, we all have 24 hours in a day. I'm not even looking at it from the perspective of, what if you're awake or if you're sleeping, all that. We all have the same amount of time in a day. So we'll use that as the baseline. But the work piece, when it comes to power, work or energy, usually people increase their power by being able to accomplish more work, being able to accomplish higher levels of energy, higher levels of value with the same amount of time. And I love this word influence because that is the word of today. People are trying to increase their influence, their level of influence with the same amount of time because their influence translates into value. What does that value mean to you, though? Because you aren't going to be able to create value if you don't know how to direct the value. Are you trying to direct the value for the outcome of a specific action? Are you trying to direct that influence in terms of an outcome of a specific dollar value, or all of the above? And what a lot of us do is we look for ways to, if you are in a career, increase your level of work that you can do, or increase the level of influence that you have by increasing your level within the organization. If you're a business owner, increasing your level of influence or your level within the organization, your control in the organization, so that you can increase your power, because ultimately that power comes with freedom. Because when you're able to produce more with the same amount of time, then you have flexibility to do things. Now, what you do with that time, that's up to you. If you're sleeping 20 hours and you're working for, great for you, and you're able to do insane amounts of work or create insane amounts of value, great for you. But I say that to say that as you're looking at what makes a powerful person powerful, yes, there is a formula for power, and most of that power is, or most of that formula really has to do with gaining external power. But one of the things as a leader that I would implore everybody to start to think more about is how to increase their authentic power. The authentic power are those things that people can't take away from you, that society can't take away from you, that your customers can't take away from you, that the counselors can't take away from you. The authentic power comes with you being in alignment with your purpose. The authentic power comes with you being in alignment with your ability to manage your emotions, having self-control. The authentic power comes in your ability to learn what you need to learn in order to achieve your purpose. Your authentic power comes with you being able to live a healthy and vibrant life, because you can have all of the influence, you can have all of the external power externally, but be powerless internally. You can have what everybody believes to be the dream job, but no control over your life. Your emotional state is a wreck. Your heart is in turmoil. And I want the leaders out there to not just think about power in terms of external influence, but your ability to manage yourself internally. so that you're getting the internal result, because most of what we are searching for in life in terms of success is a feeling. And you can have that feeling with $100,000 or $100 million. But most of what we're looking for in life is that feeling. And so when I look at what makes a powerful person powerful, I think it is their ability to achieve the state of being and feeling that they want to achieve, no matter what's going on around them, because they've learned to master themselves internally. And then the next question, or part to that question, is who affects your life most powerfully? Who affects your life most powerfully? I won't lead with this question, but as I was thinking about this question, and I want to hear from you as well, and as I was thinking about the answer to the question, who affects my life most powerfully? I think about the people that, not only the people, number one, I give the most time, and the people who also have the greatest connection, or I believe that I have the greatest spiritual connection with. And when I look at those two pieces, it's often the people that I have the greatest, for me, the people that I have the greatest spiritual connection with. And what I mean is that there's something deeper than just the amount of time that we spend together, because there are people who I can pick up with not have spoken to them after several weeks or several months, and it just feels like we never skipped a beat, because there was equity built up in those relationships. And so when I think about the people who impact me the most, it is those people who've built the most equity with me. The people who have seen me at my worst and continue to pour into me to sharpen me. The people who've seen me at my best and applauded me genuinely and then continue to encourage me. The people who were unwavering in their ability to hold me accountable for who I am and what I say I want out of life. Those are the people who impact me the most. And in this life, you'll have tons of people that will come across. Some people will say things that impact us, or try to say things that impact us negatively, or try to say things that impact us positively. But you have to be unwavering and understanding that you have full control over the impact that you allow others to have on you, because people who don't have much equity in your life should not have that much power over you. And I see the people who I spend the most time with, yes, because time is important. The people who you spend the most time with can definitely be an indicator of, people who affect your life the most powerfully. Because, proximity does increase intensity. When you're spending a lot of time with someone, being in close proximity with them does and can increase the intensity of the relationship if you are building true equity with that person. And so what does that mean to build true equity? Being vulnerable, having a certain level of vulnerability where you are shedding your skin and you are giving them insight into the core of your being, and vice versa, because sometimes people shy away from those deep conversations. If I'm hanging around you all the time and all we're doing is having surface level conversations, there's a high chance that the level of equity that we've built is very low, because we haven't gotten to the core of our beings. You haven't seen me through the tough times. I haven't seen you through the tough times that you've experienced. I don't know what led you to become who you are. Because when you understand those things about a person, you understand how to care for them. And when a person understands how to care for you and you understand how to care for them, then that puts you in a whole different category. Because then you start to see who is careful and who is careless. And it's very important to be intentional about what and how much you relinquish, because that impacts your power. That impacts and can impact your ability to manage your emotions. When you've made the decision to relinquish certain parts of you, to share certain parts of you, some people, the people that you thought were the closest to you, weaponize those things against you. Some of the closest people to you will be the most jealous, and you will be baffled at how they've hidden that for so long. And it'll often come out in the most subtle ways. It'll come out in them making a condescending statement in the form of a joke. It'll come out in the form of them trying to impose the way they want you to live on you, or based on how they live. Because how dare you live your life the way you want? And so you have to be very intentional and very careful about shedding that skin with people, because and through proximity, once you start to build that level of comfortability, especially when we're talking about work as leaders, you know, one of the things that I try to do is develop a certain level of vulnerability with the people that I lead, because that, I believe, is how you build trust. That is how you allow them to see that there is psychological safety within the environment. And that psychological safety is the foundation of trust. And when people understand that they're dealing with a leader who is going to create an environment of psychological safety, they'll start to relinquish more and more and more. And guess what? Your level of influence over the situation and over that dynamic and that relationship increases, because there is trust. But you can't build power without building trust. Too many people are focused on the getting instead of the giving. And as I'm landing this plane, I'll just say, you know, in order for you to step into your authentic power, it is important for you to really, really take inventory of your ability to monitor not only yourself and how you manage yourself and how you direct yourself, because that has everything to do with self-mastery, but also master the relationships that you have. Because as you evolve, there are times of destruction and there are times of creation, deconstruction or creation. And in order to keep the trajectory of your power going up, you have to look at the things in your life that need to be deconstructed. It could be behaviors. It could be relationships that no longer serve the path that you are on. But learning how to master those things help you to get closer and closer to authentic power. With that, I want to thank you for sharing the time with me here and sharing your comments in the chat, because again, the goal of these talks and these chats is really to build a community of people who increase our authentic power by exploring creative purpose, resilience, and confidence. That is what I want for myself, to continue to grow in that area, and that is what I want for this community. So I thank you. And until next time, you can also follow me on Instagram at only1Donnie, because over there we'll be doing open sessions and you can actually jump on in person and have a dialogue about whatever is on your heart as we explore transforming pain to purpose live. See you in the next one.